Welcome to Fear Spiral, the place where true stories and sleepless nights collide. If you're watching this right now, it's probably late, maybe past midnight. You might be lying in bed with the lights off, or driving home down some empty road, headlights cutting through the dark. Either way, you've found the right place for fear. Before we begin, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon, so you never miss a story that'll keep you awake a little longer than you planned. Tonight, we're diving deep into the highways most people avoid after dark. Stories told by real truckers, the men and women who've seen what moves in the fog, what waits at the rest stops, and what sometimes climbs into the cab when they're alone. 5 terrifying, true-style encounters from the open road, each one more unsettling than the last. So settle in, keep your eyes on the road, and remember, not everything standing on the shoulder is alive. Let's begin. The woman on Route 67. I've been driving trucks for almost 15 years now, and I've seen my fair share of strange things on the road, freak accidents, weird hitchhikers, animals darting out of nowhere, but nothing compares to what I saw on Route 67 back in the fall of 2019. It was late October, somewhere around 2:30 a.m. just outside of Kansas City. I was hauling a refrigerated trailer full of produce, trying to make it to Dallas by morning. The air was cold enough to fog the windshield, and a light mist clung to the highway, blurring the reflectors on the asphalt into a continuous silver line. I'd been on the road for about 9 hours and was planning to pull over at the next rest area. The radio had gone silent, and I remember feeling that particular kind of loneliness you only feel on long hauls, the kind that makes the hum of the engine sound almost alive. That's when I saw her. At first, I thought it was a deer. There was movement in my headlights just ahead on the shoulder. But as I slowed down, I realized it was a woman, standing there alone wearing a long white dress that looked completely out of place for that time of night. Her hair was dark, matted, and stuck to her face from the mist. She wasn't waving or walking, just standing perfectly still facing the road. Now, you see a lot of weird stuff on highways, drunks, runaways, lost tourists, but something about her posture stopped me cold. She didn't seem confused or scared. She looked expectant, like she was waiting. Against my better judgment, I pulled over. My headlights cut across her face, and she lifted her head slightly. I noticed she was barefoot. Her feet were gray with dirt. I rolled down the window a few inches and leaned out. "You all right, ma'am?" I called out. She didn't answer, just stared. I could see her eyes reflecting the light, glassy, unfocused. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd been in an accident or needed help. So I turned on my hazards, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped out. The cold hit me immediately, sharp and damp. When I walked around the front of the truck, she was gone. Just like that. Gone. There was nothing but the empty shoulder stretching off into the fog. I swung my flashlight in every direction. Nothing but the drizzle of rain and the distant chirp of insects. I checked under the trailer, even behind it, thinking maybe she'd stumbled or hidden. But there was no sign of her. I stood there for a while, heart pounding, trying to rationalize it. Maybe I'd imagined her. Maybe it was a trick of the fog, or a reflection, or exhaustion catching up with me. I got back in the cab, locked the doors, and took a deep breath. That's when I noticed the smell. It hit me as soon as I closed the door. A faint, sweet, rotten smell, like wet flowers in decay. I looked around, thinking maybe something had spoiled in the cooler, but the smell wasn't coming from the back. It was inside the cab. Then, in my side mirror, I saw movement. She was standing behind the trailer, barely visible through the mist, her head tilted to one side. I froze. My hand hovered over the ignition key. She started walking toward the cab, slow and deliberate, her white dress dragging across the wet asphalt. I could hear her bare feet slapping the pavement, faint but steady. My mind went into full panic mode. I slammed the truck into gear and hit the gas. The rig lurched forward, tires spitting water, and the figure vanished into the darkness behind me. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the engine. I didn't look back. I just kept driving, pushing 80 down that empty stretch of highway. After about 15 minutes, I started to calm down. My brain tried to fill in the blanks. Maybe she was some lost hitchhiker, maybe I'd hallucinated, but I couldn't shake the smell. It was still faintly there, like it had soaked into the upholstery. When I finally pulled into a truck stop around 4 a.m., I parked under the brightest lights I could find. There were a few other rigs there, but the lot was mostly empty. I climbed into the sleeper cab to grab my duffel and noticed something that made my stomach drop. There were wet footprints. Bare, human footprints. Leading from the driver's seat to the back of the sleeper, the floor mat was damp like someone had stepped in with soaking feet. The prints stopped right beside my bunk. I didn't stay to look any further. I grabbed my things, went inside the truck stop diner, and sat there until sunrise pretending to eat breakfast I couldn't touch. Later that morning, I told another driver about it, an older guy who'd been hauling freight longer than I'd been alive. He looked at me with this strange expression and said, "Route 67, huh? You probably saw her. They say a woman died out there back in the 80s. Car broke down, some drunk hit her while she was walking to find help. Folks see her now and then. Usually on foggy nights I laughed it off, but I never took that route again after dark. To this day I still think about those footprints. Sometimes when I'm driving alone at night and the road goes quiet, I swear I can smell that faint, sweet rot again, like wet flowers left too long in the rain. And every time, without fail, I check the back of the cab, just to make sure I'm still alone." Voices from the CB radio. I've been driving long-haul routes for about 12 years now, mostly through the Midwest and South. I like the solitude, the hum of the engine, the rhythm of the road, the long stretches of quiet. But sometimes that quiet can turn against you. This happened about 3 years ago. Sometime around late November, I was hauling steel coils from Ohio down to Louisiana, cutting through a stretch of highway in Arkansas that barely sees any traffic after midnight. It was one of those nights when the fog sits low on the ground, thick enough that your high beams make it worse instead of better. The world narrows down to that tunnel of light in front of your truck, and you start feeling like you're driving through someone else's dream. I remember checking the clock. It was 2:14 a.m., and I was trying to stay awake with coffee and static from the CB radio. I keep it on channel 19 even though most truckers these days barely use it. It's mostly static and occasional chatter about cops or roadkill. But that night the static started changing. It wasn't normal background hiss. It was like something was trying to form words underneath it. Low, broken whispers cutting in and out of the static. I thought maybe it was interference from another channel or a nearby rig. I adjusted the dial, and that's when I heard it clearly. "Help. Please. Someone." I froze. The voice was faint. A man's voice, breaking up like it was coming from far away. I grabbed the mic and said, "This is southbound on I-49. Who's calling for help?" There was silence for a few seconds, then more static. "Please, truck. Flipped. Mile. 213. The transmission cut out again. I sat there staring at the CB like an idiot, trying to process it. I hadn't passed any wrecks for miles. But 213, that had to be mile marker 213, right? I glanced at my GPS. I was near mile 208, about 5 miles from where the voice said he was. I've seen enough wrecks to know you don't ignore a distress call. So I grabbed my flashlight and took the next exit, looping back up the northbound side to head toward marker 213. The fog was thicker now, and the road felt endless. Every sign that appeared out of the mist made my chest tighten a little more. When I finally reached the spot, I slowed down, scanning the shoulder with my lights. Nothing. No flipped truck. No wreck, not even skid marks. Just wet asphalt and fog. I pulled over anyway, flipped on my hazards, and stepped out. The air smelled like rain and metal. My boots splashed in shallow puddles as I walked along the shoulder, calling out, "Hey, anybody out here?" Silence. Then my CB crackled again, loud enough that I heard it from outside the cab. "You shouldn't have stopped." I swear my blood turned to ice. I spun around, shining my light toward the truck, half expecting to see someone standing there. But there was nothing, just my idling rig and that wall of fog. I climbed back in, locked the doors, and grabbed the mic again. "Who is this? What kind of sick joke is this?" Static, then laughter, low, distorted laughter, like it was playing through broken speakers. I yanked the cord out of the radio, heart hammering in my chest. The laughter stopped instantly, replaced by silence so deep I could hear the ticking of my dashboard clock. I didn't waste another second. I threw the truck in gear and got the hell out of there. About half an hour later, I stopped at a 24-hour diner near Texarkana. The place was empty except for a waitress who looked half asleep. I ordered coffee just to calm my nerves and told her, half jokingly, about what had happened. She didn't laugh. She said, "You were on I-49 near marker 213, right?" I nodded. She sighed and said quietly, "There was a bad crash there a few years ago. A tanker flipped during the fog, killed the driver. Some say you can still hear him on the radio calling for help." I tried to brush it off, but she wasn't smiling. Later that morning, when I got back in my truck, I noticed something strange. My CB radio, the one I'd unplugged, was on. The green light was glowing faintly. Even though the power switch was off, I haven't used that CB since. It's still mounted there, but I keep it disconnected. And sometimes when I'm driving through heavy fog around 2 or 3 a.m., I could swear I hear that faint static again, like something whispering from the dead air. I tell myself it's just interference, but deep down I know the truth. Some voices don't come from this side of the highway anymore. The rest stop lights. I've been a long-haul driver for over a decade, mostly hauling freight across the Midwest and Southeast. You get used to the silence out here, those long, empty stretches of highway that seem to swallow sound and light whole. But sometimes that silence hides things you can't explain. This happened in early March of 2021, somewhere between Amarillo and Oklahoma City. I was running behind schedule and decided to drive through the night. Around 1:47 a.m., I pulled into one of those small, half-forgotten rest stops, one of those with just a few dim streetlights, 2 vending machines, and bathrooms that smell like mildew and old rain. The kind of place most drivers avoid after dark. But I was exhausted. I figured I'd park, stretch my legs, maybe grab a soda, and take a 20-minute nap before hitting the road again. The lot was empty except for one other semi-parked way in the corner. Engine off, no lights inside. As I stepped out, the air was cold enough to sting. A light drizzle tapped against the hood of my truck, and the only sounds were the hum of the vending machine and the faint buzz from the flickering lights overhead. That's when I noticed something off. The lights weren't just flickering randomly. They were flickering in sequence. The one closest to the entrance would blink off, then the next one, then the next, like a wave rolling down the lot toward me. Then they'd all come back on. At first I figured it was a wiring issue, but the pattern repeated, perfectly timed. It almost felt deliberate. I was halfway to the vending machines when I saw movement in the dark space between the lights. A figure, maybe 30 yards away, standing just beyond the last working lamp. I could barely make it out. Looked like a tall man, maybe wearing a jacket, just standing still, facing me. "Hey!" I called out, my voice echoing against the concrete. No response. He didn't move, didn't even shift. I felt my stomach tighten. Maybe he was another driver, maybe not. The rain started coming down a bit harder, and that's when the lights flickered again. But this time, only the ones near me came back on. The far end stayed dark. The figure was gone. I told myself he'd just walked off, but I picked up my pace anyway, grabbed a bottle from the vending machine, and turned back toward my rig. That's when I heard the sound. Footsteps. Soft, wet footsteps behind me. They stopped when I stopped. I turned around fast. No one. Just the hiss of the rain and the empty lot. My pulse was racing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I got back in the cab, locked the doors, and started the engine. The clock on the dash read 2:03 a.m. I leaned back in the seat, took a sip of my drink, and tried to calm down. That's when the lights outside started flickering again. Not in a wave this time, just one by one, closer and closer to my truck. Each time one went out, the darkness crept closer, swallowing the light around it. Then something slammed against my passenger side door. The sound was loud enough to make me jump out of my seat. I turned and saw a pale hand pressed against the glass, just a hand, flat, fingers spread wide. It left a wet print on the window before sliding down and disappearing. I threw the truck into gear and floored it out of that rest stop. I didn't even look back. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like the steering wheel was vibrating under my hands. I didn't slow down until I hit a well-lit gas station about 20 miles up the road. When I finally stopped, I got out to check the side of the truck. The window was still wet from the rain, but that handprint was gone, completely gone. I stood there under the bright fluorescent lights, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. Maybe it was condensation. Maybe my mind playing tricks on me after hours on the road. I told myself that over and over, but I couldn't ignore what came next. Later that morning, I talked to another driver at the truck stop diner. He mentioned that rest area near Amarillo and said quietly, "You know that place has been shut down twice, right? A driver was found dead there back in 2015, locked in his cab. They never caught who did it." I didn't say anything, just nodded and stared into my coffee. It's been years since that night. But every time I pass that stretch of highway, I feel it again. That unease. That pull to look out the window even though I know I shouldn't. Sometimes, when it rains hard enough and the road lights start flickering in sequence, I still catch myself checking the passenger mirror, half expecting to see a wet hand pressed against the glass, Mile marker 230. I've been a trucker for almost 20 years, and in that time I've learned to trust my instincts on the road. When something feels wrong, you listen, because out there, in the dark stretches between towns, nobody's coming to help you fast. This story happened in the fall of 2017, somewhere along Highway 41 in Tennessee, near a stretch of road that runs through forested hills and barely used exits. The night it happened, I was hauling lumber from Kentucky to Georgia. It was a quiet night, clear sky, stars like pinholes over the dark tree line. I remember the time exactly, 2:09 a.m. I'd just passed mile marker 209 when I saw headlights up ahead, hazard lights blinking on the shoulder. It looked like a small sedan, silver or gray. I slowed down automatically, figuring someone had broken down. Most truckers will tell you we look out for each other on the road, even for regular drivers. When I got closer, I noticed something strange. The car's driver's side door was open, but no one was inside. Just an empty seat and the hazards blinking in the dark. I pulled over about 20 yards ahead, flipped my own hazards on, and grabbed my flashlight. The moment I stepped out, the forest hit me with this heavy silence. No crickets, no wind, no movement. Just the steady blink of those orange hazard lights reflecting off the wet asphalt. I called out, "Hey, you need help?" No answer. I walked up to the car. The engine wasn't running, but the keys were still in the ignition. A faint smell of gasoline mixed with something else, something metallic like old blood. I shined my light around and saw that the trunk was open a few inches, like it hadn't latched properly. For some reason, that detail made me uneasy. I circled the car slowly, light scanning across the trees. The fog was starting to roll in from the woods, curling around my boots. The ground looked disturbed, like someone had been dragging their feet or pacing near the edge of the shoulder. That's when I saw it. About 10 feet into the trees, a dark shape. A person, standing perfectly still between the trunks. They were facing away from me, just standing there in that thick fog. "Hey," I called again. "You okay?" They didn't respond. The shape started moving then, not turning around but slowly stepping deeper into the woods. My gut twisted. Every instinct screamed at me not to follow, but something made me take a few steps forward anyway. That's when my CB radio crackled to life inside the truck. "Don't follow them." The voice was low, distorted but clear enough that I froze. I turned back toward the cab, thinking maybe another driver was warning me, but I hadn't broadcast anything. My mic was still hanging on its hook. I looked back at the trees. The person was gone. No footsteps, no sound, nothing but that thick, creeping fog. I walked backward slowly until I reached my rig, keeping my flashlight on the tree line. I climbed in, locked the doors, and just sat there staring at the mirror. The hazard lights from the car kept flashing behind me, pulsing like a heartbeat. Then, after a few seconds, they went out. No flicker, no fade, just total darkness. My radio hissed again, the same static as before, and then, clear as day, "You should have left sooner, that was all I needed." I floored it out of there, watching the rear view until the road swallowed the scene behind me. I didn't stop until I hit a truck plaza near Chattanooga around 3:30 a.m. I couldn't shake it. The voice, the figure, the open trunk. I told another driver what I'd seen, half expecting him to laugh it off, but he just got real quiet. He said, "You said mile marker 213. They found a guy out there a few years ago, driver of a sedan. Car broke down, went missing before help arrived. They found his body a week later, deep in the woods. Trunk had blood in it." I didn't know what to say. I just sat there staring at my coffee while my hands shook. Since that night, I've avoided that stretch of highway. I even rerouted deliveries to keep from passing it. But sometimes when the road gets quiet around 2 a.m. and the CB goes dead, I still think about that voice and the figure walking deeper into the woods. And every time I pass a set of hazards blinking on an empty stretch of road, my stomach drops because now I know not everyone you see out there is still alive. The sleeper cab visitor. I've been driving trucks for a living since 2008, and I can tell you this job gives you stories you'll never forget. Not the kind you tell for fun, but the kind that stay with you, quietly gnawing at the back of your mind when the night gets too quiet. This one happened about 4 years ago, in February of 2021, somewhere along Interstate 80 in Nebraska. If you've ever driven that stretch, you know how desolate it feels. Miles of flat nothingness, truck stops spaced too far apart, and nights that seem to stretch forever. I was hauling a load of packaged food, heading west toward Cheyenne. The weather had turned ugly, snow flurries, biting wind, and a temperature that hovered around 15-degree hours. The road was slick and mostly deserted, so around 2:25 a.m., I decided to pull into a small rest area to get some sleep before the storm worsened. There were only 2 other trucks there, both parked far apart under the dull orange glow of sodium lights. I parked near the back, locked the doors, killed the engine, and crawled into the sleeper. The silence out there was heavy, that kind of silence that almost hums in your ears. I remember lying there, bundled in my blanket, listening to the faint ticking of the cooling engine. Eventually, I drifted off. I don't know how long I was asleep before I woke up. Maybe an hour, maybe less. What woke me was a sound, soft rhythmic tap, tap, tap. It was coming from outside, near the passenger side window. At first I thought it might be sleet hitting the glass, but then it came again, slower this time. Tap, tap. I held my breath and listened. It was steady, deliberate, like knuckles on glass. I sat up slowly, my heart already pounding. The sleeper was dark except for the faint orange glow leaking in through the curtains. I reached for my flashlight but stopped when I heard it again, this time followed by something else, the sound of snow crunching under slow, heavy footsteps. Someone was walking around my truck. I pulled the curtain back an inch and peered out. The snow outside reflected enough light that I could see the ground, but no one was there. Just my own tire tracks and the falling flakes. Then came a soft thud from the back of the cab. I turned toward the sleeper door, the one that opens to the trailer connection, and froze. The door handle was twitching, slowly, like someone was testing it from the outside. I grabbed the flashlight and my pocket knife. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely flick the light on. I whispered to myself, "It's the wind. It's just the wind." But then I heard breathing, slow, deep breaths, just outside the door. I leaned forward and whispered through the glass, "Who's there?" The breathing stopped. Silence. For a few seconds I actually thought maybe I'd imagined it. Then from right outside the window, "Let me in." The voice was low, almost calm, but it froze every muscle in my body. It didn't sound panicked or angry. It sounded wrong. I didn't answer. I just sat there gripping the flashlight, too scared to even blink. Then came another whisper, closer this time. "It's cold out here." That was it. I snapped. I turned on the flashlight and shone it through the window, but there was nobody there. Just the snow swirling past the glass. I stayed awake the rest of the night, every nerve on edge, waiting for the sound to come back. It never did. By dawn, my nerves were shot. The snow had stopped, and I figured I'd at least step out to see if there were any footprints. When I opened the door, I immediately noticed something wrong. There were no footprints in the snow, none. The ground around my truck was completely undisturbed. No tracks, no marks, not even where someone could have stood to knock on the glass. But there was one thing. On the passenger side window, half frozen into the condensation from inside, were 4 faint streaks. Like fingers dragged slowly down the glass, I wiped them off fast, got back in the cab, and left that rest stop without even doing my pre-trip check. I told myself I'd hallucinated the whole thing. Sleep paralysis, exhaustion, whatever made sense. But later that same week, I stopped at a diner in Wyoming and overheard 2 drivers talking about the same rest area. One of them said he'd heard someone walking around his rig at night. Said he saw a man standing by his door, just staring. When he opened it, no one was there. I didn't say a word. Just finished my coffee and left. Now every time I park to sleep, I make sure the curtains are drawn tight and the doors are double locked. But sometimes, when the night gets quiet enough, I still think about that voice, low and steady, right outside my window. Let me in. And when I do, I can almost hear it again, muffled by the snow, patient and waiting.